Hello, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. When you write content, whether it be a blog, an ad, or any other form, do you take the necessary time to carefully edit the content to show your brand's quality? Or are you pushed, like a lot of us, at digital speed to get your content out there more quickly than you should? Erin Brenner is the CEO of Right Touch Editing, and she's a subject matter expert in content copywriting and editing. And on this episode, we'll discuss all forms of content and the lens needed to edit it for quality, the need for copy and content strategy, strategies for mobile and shorter form content, and quite simply how to make your content better. So let's tune in to an editing pro with a copywriting shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Erin, thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today. If you would tell us a little bit about your career and your background to date.
Thanks, Shark. I have been in the publishing industry for a couple of decades now, and I actually started way at the bottom. I started as a proofreader, proofing direct nonprofit mail, which was a lot of fun, but it also made me feel good
Sure.
to put some positive vibes out in the world. And then just as just going along, I get bored quickly. So I moved into copy editing, worked for a couple of companies looking at market research and marketing training, information. Back in 2000, I worked for a website called ClickZ, and we published information and news about digital marketing, and that really put me in the digital space.
Sure.
From there, I worked for ClickZ for quite a while, about a decade, and I got bored.
Yeah.
So I started my own company, Right Touch Editing, and now I get to do whatever I want to do. So I still do copy editing and proofreading, but I do copywriting, I do developmental editing, I do training, whatever is needed out there.
Sure.
That sounds like it would be fun.
Sure. Well, then let's talk a little bit about how the market has shifted for editors. I mean, you started in a period, obviously, when there was a lot more print material out there, and a lot of that has shifted into a faster, less well edited digital, material. So you see a lot of digital marketers now that are working on copywriting and editing and looking at that. That's a lot different than, say, print with typical newsrooms. How have you seen the market shift for editors in general?
There's been a massive shift for editors in the last 20 years. You used to get a job. You might work at a newspaper. You might work for a book publisher. There were fewer editing jobs, I think, in corporations because fewer corporations were publishing.
Mm-hmm.
But with digital, anybody can be a publisher.
Sure.
And so while there's a lot more copy out there, there's a lot more stuff, there's also a demand to publish it faster, and there's less concern or less attention paid to
Exactly.
The kind of quality that's out there. So where editors are losing jobs, fewer and fewer of us are actually employed at newspapers. Newspapers are just cutting editing out. They're condensing the editing process from 2 or 3 stages down to 1.
Mm-hmm.
The New York Times did that just last year, where instead of having someone look at the copy for content, how is the story being told? Are we being truthful? And then having a cleanup pass where copy editors are making sure the grammar is correct and the style is being followed. Now there's one editor doing all of that. And publishing houses, they're just outsourcing it. So more and more copy editors who are working as freelancers. And it's posed a couple of issues. One is that you used to go into editing and you'd learn on the job.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are no senior editors at a lot of these places to learn from. So we're having to recreate how we train. There are a lot more training programs at universities. There's a lot more private training. I myself have offered a lot of private training as well as taught at higher institutes of learning. The other side of it is, though, that we're not always using editors, and editors have to find a way to make that argument that you need us.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have someone look over your copy and see the things that you as the writer can no longer see, because our brains show us what we expect to
Mm-hmm.
see when we're familiar with our copy, and it takes someone who hasn't seen it before to start seeing maybe some of the less elegant turns of phrases we might use, to find the errors that are hiding in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big job to try and make all these publishers, all these companies who are trying so hard to put out good content and get the attention that their company needs, to get them to understand that part of getting that attention is putting out good quality content and taking a little bit of time, spending a little bit of money to make your content better, so that people aren't just blasting past it, going to the next site.
Agreed. And I'm a big fan of this. I mean, as somebody who appreciates the reading of good grammar more than necessarily being a good practitioner myself, and appreciating the English language or just the value of language. How do marketers look at the value of doing this? I mean, I get the why, but can you describe a little bit of the impact of what paying attention to editing and copywriting and providing good language use can add value?
I think we tend to focus on those big errors that make it into published content. There's a missing serial comma, and suddenly, it's a $6 million problem. You have a problem with your contract. But I think it's the subtler problems that marketers need to focus on. We're told time and again, you have 2 to 3 seconds to grab somebody's attention, and there is so much noise out there. If I don't like what you're saying, it's really easy for me to go find somebody else and who's saying something I do like.
Sure.
So it's really important for marketers to write content that fulfills the need, that speaks to the reader, connects with them emotionally, because we all want that kind of connection, and that's what keeps us reading.
Yeah.
There's some, we recognize ourselves in it. There's some emotion in there that we can empathize with, and so we need to start that way. But we also need to know what we're going to do with that, because the difference between success and failure isn't just telling a good story. It's getting us to connect that story with what the company is looking to do. What are your goals?
Sure.
What are you doing with this copy? Because we can just tell stories, but we're not gonna make our business goals that way.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've always found extremely interesting is you could find a flub, if you will, in an image, and easily spend, say, $250 on an agency hour for a graphic artist, who's going to take at least an hour, if not more, to fix an image. And let's say it took them 4 hours, half-day project. How many times have you heard, hey, we'd love to give you $1,000 just to come in and edit this content that will be optimized later all over the web? So it's funny how we do look at imagery, which does grab your attention more quickly, but a longer lasting impact can be those actual words that that go well beyond and where they live out in the Google world. So as you do this, though, I know that great copywriters have trouble finding clients, and I know that business owners who desperately need better copy don't know where to find copywriters. I mean, what types of marketing projects as a copywriter and editor do you see the most? Is it brochures, web content, ad copy? What are the kind of projects that you undertake generally?
Most of what I see is what would be called content marketing.
Sure.
Some way the company is giving its audience essentially something for nothing, whether it's information or training, in a longer form. And sometimes they're called
So you've read your share of
reports.
blogs.
There are some blogs,
Yeah.
a lot of reports, a lot of white papers, case studies. There are a bunch of names, and sometimes there's not a lot of difference between the different labels. It's still about telling your story in one way or another.
So what are the types of common mistakes that you see marketers making today?
The biggest mistake I see isn't so much in their copy, it's a lack of planning before they sit down to write.
Yeah.
There's a
So
lack
true.
of strategy. We all have so much to do, and certainly writing copy, whether it's an ad or a report, it's another item on their list. And I get that. You got to get it done. So you just want to start putting words on a page. The problem is if you do that, you're writing from a place of poverty. You need to plan. You need to know what's the goal of this piece and what's the larger business goal this piece is supporting. Who's my audience? Where are they in the sales funnel? What are some magic words that gets my audience attention? I think we kind of overuse the term keywords.
Sure.
And trigger words are certainly very negative, but so I start calling them magic words. What are those things that get our attention, and what are the important points you have to make in this piece? I will look at, not so much with my clients, but just out on the web, you can see where someone has forgotten to put the name of the program, the date the event is happening. And they seem so obvious. Why would we forget them? Because we're in a rush and we're living inside of it, so we take it for granted that people have the same context we do. And so if we stop, we need to pull ourselves back, create a strategy around what we're writing and see how it fits in our larger business strategy, and make sure we're making notes of those important facts that have to be in there. Because then it's very easy to take 5 minutes to go, oh, did I put the company name in?
Sure.
Did I put the date? Is the URL correct? And did I click on it to make sure it works? So it's this lack of strategy so I see lots of different errors, but it all really comes down to a lack of sitting down, taking 5 minutes, whatever it takes to put together a strategy for this piece.
So have you seen editing and at least, copywriting improved at all as we begin to tell stories? I know, blogging obviously has been around for a while. You've got, ads that you run on, Bing and Google and Yahoo and everywhere else. Those have been around for obviously a long time. Social media has been out for a decade plus. Storytelling's been around, for eons, but you've really seen marketers embrace it in the last few years. So has telling those stories, has that helped improve the way people focus and look at copywriting and editing?
That's a good question. I think marketers are doing more to try and tell stories. I think, though, it really depends on the company, whether or not they're focusing on are they telling a little story in an ad, or is that ad part of a larger story? And some companies do that really well, and some do not. You still have all these silos where one team is not talking to another team and saying, well, how does this all work together? And when they do it, when they see storytelling for their individual asset and for the whole program, brand, what have you, then we see an improvement in what they say, and we see an improvement in how people react and remember it. And when it's all disconnected, there's less success, and you're working a lot harder to try and build attention.
Sure.
Because it doesn't matter what your touch point is. It doesn't matter if it's online or in person. It doesn't matter if it's an ad or a report. You should see those commonalities.
Sure.
throughout everything so that people remember. Um, Early on in my career, I read the story of the Coke bottle, that iconic glass
Mm-hmm.
Coke bottle,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a brilliant design because no matter how it breaks, no matter how it smashes, every piece of glass is is recognizable as part of a Coke bottle. You know what it is. And our marketing programs need to be like that. It doesn't matter what piece they look at, it needs to be recognizable as
Sure.
coming from this brand.
So then you mentioned something earlier about keywords. Talk about how SEO plays into editing and copywriting. I know that as you are editing pieces, you probably are having to look at keywords quite a lot, those ones that have to be stuffed into, a content piece. But where does copywriting and editing sit along more closely with SEO in order to improve the optimization of a content piece?
Well, I think they work together very naturally. It's because if you're doing SEO right, um, you've chosen keywords and categories and all the rest of it that fits in with your story.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as a copywriter and a copy editor, I want to know what are some important points in your story, and it should be your keywords for SEO. So when we're seeing again this program as one whole unit, SEO is part of it. It's a way to take those pieces of the glass Coke bottle, make sure they show up in Google. You know,
Sure.
I sometimes have a difficult time getting marketers to understand that, to give me what are your keywords. Well, what does your SEO look like so that I can work it into the copywriting or I can make sure it's present when I'm editing. But when you do that, you really create a more unified, stronger program.
Sure. Are you spending a lot of time on PPC ads as well, and how that plays in with basically the optimization of ads?
I don't. I don't see a lot of ads in general.
Yeah.
I do think that it all has to tie in. You should be using the same keywords.
Sure.
And you should be doing writing tight is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of practice, but it also takes a second set of eyes to look and say, yeah, you've got your keywords in there, your message is there, but here's a way we could say it a little shorter. And sometimes you're just dropping out a preposition. You're just reversing word order that lets you say things with fewer words. And having a couple people look at a piece of text can really help improve that concision.
Sure. So generally, I know you can't speak to every piece anybody puts out, but are there any kind of success profiles you can, cite so that our listeners can go out and look and see who's doing, copywriting and editing fairly well?
One really good example is SAP. Their Digitalist magazine is
Mm-hmm.
really a website. They produce all kinds of content. They do articles and magazines. They do white papers and the whole gamut.
Mm-hmm.
But what they've done is they don't talk about their software.
Mm-hmm.
What they talk about is what their software helps people do, and it's that whole what's in it for me, what's my problem, and how are you as the brand going to solve it. So they talk about the industries they work in and where they might be headed,
Mm-hmm.
and how technology is going to affect that. And it's really powerful.
Sure.
There's a lot of content there, and the software is something you're not going to buy it every day. It's
Right.
so, keeping top of mind, continually educating their readership builds that trust, builds value, and when it's time to spend thousands or millions of dollars, they're going to go with a company that's given them so much information.
Sure, sure. Well, I'm not going to ask you to necessarily cite any massive failures, but at least on where do you see the most failures for marketers? Is it generally on a blog piece? Is it generally on a website content? Where are things that generally marketers need to start focusing more of their time on to improve, you know, possible failures of theirs as far as their copywriting and editing go?
I think it all comes back to having a unified strategy.
Sure.
Um, writing, publishing a blog is really tough. It's very demanding, and not every blog post is going to be a winner.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are better than others, and that's okay. Not every ad is going to be great. Not every newsletter is going to be great. No one can keep up that quality all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when you read the blog and it's a total disconnect from
Sure.
the advertising or the newsletter, where I don't know how to feel about what they're telling me. I'm confused. There's no
Mm-hmm.
clear picture, and so as a reader, as a customer, it really distances me.
Sure.
It's when everything is unified, things go really well. So I really want to see marketers taking more time for strategy and working together, breaking down their silos, working together as one team, and making a strategy that goes for everybody.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that as we change and we're in sort of a shorter attention span, especially as we view so much more content with so much more noise, doing a lot of it on mobile. How do you, as a copywriter and editor, now approach that form of writing? So we went from long form stories to 800-word blog content.
Mm-hmm.
That's even shorter. Try to get somebody to read past the first or second paragraph. But how do you approach that from a copywriter and editor standpoint?
You really have to adapt the writing to go with that reading habit. I think there's a lot of editors, especially, who mourn the kind of death of really long form. But you have to adapt, and you do that by having clear, descriptive titles, an engaging lead that starts to deliver on what the title promises you.
Mm-hmm.
Shorter paragraphs, top-loaded paragraphs,
Mm-hmm.
by which I mean, the most important information goes at the top of your paragraph. Front-load your sentences, so the most important information is at the front of your sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And English, in English, the position of the words tells you what's going on. So your subject comes before your verb in most cases. And so order is important, putting your actor up front, putting your action up front so that we get it right away.
Mm-hmm.
And then going back and trimming sentences, using more active voice, more strong visual verbs, shorter, simpler sentences, long sentences with byways and roundabout trips are lovely to read, but we've trained ourselves to want to skip ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So just a simpler sentence construction can really help. And then going back and seeing what you can get rid of, what editors call deadwood.
Yeah.
Every word has to do its job. Every word has to carry its weight. And if it's not, you need to get rid of it, because we're just not going to, as readers, we're not going to be patient enough.
So how does someone progress in their career as an editor and copywriter? I mean, obviously it's a tough business. It's tough to find clients. It's tough for people to find
Mm-hmm.
you. I mean, being a freelancer and an entrepreneur is tough in itself, let alone a needed industry that unfortunately a lot of marketers don't pay enough attention to. But how do you progress in your career as an editor and copywriter today with the demographics, if you will, of copywriting and editing in newsrooms and things like that changing so much?
I'll tell you as soon as we figured it out.
Yeah, really.
Honestly, it's a work in process. How does it work? Editors in general are struggling with making that transition to being business owners, and it's a message I push out a lot. You're not just a freelancer.
Mm-hmm.
You are a business owner. And in a sense, it's very freeing. How do you want to progress in your career? What do you want to do next?
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen writers and editors make massive shifts when they've decided this is not really, maybe I've been working on business copy and it's really not what I want to do. I'm going to start, I want to edit novels. And so there's a shift in going after those clients. But a lot of us are kind of making it up as we go along. I started as a freelancer. I started with marketing because that was the background I had come from. And I toyed with a little bit of this and a little bit of that and decided, no, I really like marketing, and I think I'm good at it. I think I understand it well enough to be helpful to my clients. But it's still all about making sure you have the training, keeping your skills up to date, sitting down and planning your business. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Do you have a business plan? What's your marketing plan look like? And you have to market. You have to do it all the time. You have to go and kind of identify who your ideal client is and go figure out where they hang out, where you can connect with them, and what they like to talk about in that setting, and start to build that relationship with them. Start to give them information that they would find helpful, let them see you as a person and start to get to know them, and just continually feed that beast. There's a lot of referrals that go on. Facebook has been wonderful for us because there are lots of groups on Facebook for writers and for editors, and we tend to help each other out. If we can't take on a project, it's likely we'll refer somebody, and it's likely we'll refer somebody that we've gotten to know in these groups, so that we trust them and know that our brands won't be tarnished by handing off this job.
Sure.
So referrals are still a great way to build a business.
Oh, I bet. Well, Erin, it is that time. Are you ready for the 5 most important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Yes, hit me with them.
Copy editing or copywriting?
Do I really have to choose?
You have to choose. Choose your favorite child.
I feel like that's Sophie's choice. Some days I'm ready to write, and some days I'm ready to edit. And I think for me, it's being able to flip back and forth.
Sure. So your choice is?
Right
today.
Now it's copywriting.
Okay.
Today it would be copywriting.
All right. Here's another one from looking at your profile. Knitting or crocheting?
Knitting. I haven't learned to crochet yet.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't think of something else. Boston Celtics or New England Patriots?
Oh, I don't know. That's hard because you're supposed to love all the hometown teams. But if I had to pick, I'd have to go with the Patriots. English
major or content marketing? We'll see which one gives you the best job training.
English major. You learn to deconstruct the writing, so you get to learn how it works. And that allows you to both write better and learn to edit.
Agreed. And Erin, the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Biscuits.
Perfect. So, Erin, where do people find out more about you, your social channels, website? Where do you want people to go to find out more about your thought leadership in copywriting and copy editing?
They can go to righttouchediting.com. I post news about what's going on, but I also have a lot of free resources for marketers and editors.
Excellent. Erin, thank you so much for being on A Shark's Perspective today.
Thank you so much.
So there was my conversation with Erin Brenner, the CEO of Right Touch Editing, and she's a subject matter expert in content copywriting and editing. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with her. First, we are so busy as marketers today, putting out a ton of content, especially considering that brands are publishers. And with digital comes a lot more speed, but there is simply less concern and attention paid to quality. That's unfortunate considering how easy it is to rectify that with attention to editing, especially considering that we're trying to get attention for our brands. As Erin said, part of the getting that attention is putting out good quality content and taking a little bit of time and spending a little bit of money to make your content better. Quite simply, an editor offers a fresh pair of eyes, and those eyes are on your quality. As I said, we're quick to spend money on a graphic or a picture, and I've done graphic design for years, so I'm a fan. However, it's hard to spend the same amount of time for a content piece, but the content you produce can be so far-reaching on the web. Second, anything you do should have some framework of strategy behind it. It should provide you direction in your content and copy planning. As she said, the biggest mistake I see isn't so much in their copy. It's a lack of planning before they sit down to write. There's a lack of strategy. Good point. Third, it all comes down to that unified strategy. There are still so many teams and campaigns and agencies and content and copy that aren't working together. They're working hard in their individual swim lanes, but they're still siloed. Remember that a customer only sees your brand messaging, and they don't see all of the people working behind all of the curtains. So take the time to get the alignment needed on your copy, since it's that messaging that they so often read first. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. It's been an honor for me to spend this time with you in order to discuss another one of the many components that makes up marketing today. So take a look at your own content quality with a fresh pair of eyes and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.